A better word for the summarize function might be aggregate. What summarize does is creates an aggregate value based upon a function you pass in, and then additionally it will allow you to aggregate by some particular column or column names that you give it. In this example, I'm going to take my perf table, pass it into my summarize, and then I'm going to tell it I want to use the count function. Make sure we differentiate the count function here from the count operator we just saw in the previous clip. In this example, we're actually using the count function. We can tell it's the function because of the parenthesis at the end. So the count function is what I'm going to use for this summary, and the by says what column name do I want to execute this function on. So summarize count by counter name. So let's go execute this. And here we can see that for the disk reads per second, I had 1,428,859 rows. Bytes sent per second had 1,855,121 rows, and so forth. Now I'm not limited to just a single column in my summaries. Let's scroll down here and you can see I have two different columns. I want to count by object name and counter name. And here we can see for the last 24 hours, for the combination of processor information and percent user time, I had 909,290 rows. For the combination of network interface and bytes total per second, I had 565,268 rows. Now, one of the things you may notice is in the output, it has count underbar. Well, that's not the most pretty name to give a column. So we can actually rename this by simply giving it a new column name of our own and set it equal to that function. Here I've said perf count equals the count function. When I execute this, you'll see in the results set that instead of count underbar, I have perf count. Now I mentioned a moment ago that the count function is one of the types of functions I can summarize by. If I scroll down, you're going to see I have a second function here. I have the average free space equals, and then I'm using the AVG function, the average, and I want to tell it what I want to average is the counter value. I'm taking my perf table, I'm limiting the output using the where clause to just the counters of percent free space. I'm then going to summarize, and I'm going to have it return the number of entries is the count column. I'm going to have it return a number of entries column, which is the count. And I'm going to have it return an average free space, which is the average of the counter value. And I want to break this out by counter name. So when I execute this query, you'll see that for my percent free space, I had 882,016 entries, and that the average free space value for that was 81.73. Now sometimes you want to summarize your data into logical groupings. Most commonly, you want to summarize things by a particular date. In this example, you see I'm taking the perf table, I'm going to summarize it to get a count, which I'm renaming the number of entries, but I want to group these by the time generated. For that, we use by, and then I'm using the bin function. The bin function says, well, what column do you want to group these by and what time frame? So here I'm using 1D so I can summarize it. How many entries did I have on a daily basis? So we can see here that for May the 9th, I had 12,833,463 entries. And for May the 10th, I had 86,088,589 entries. Be aware that these numbers are a little misleading because this query isn't exactly what it seems. You'll note that even though we're binning by days and we have 2 days in our output, notice the date picker is set to the last 24 hours. If this was, for example, noon right now, we would be going from noon yesterday through noon today. Therefore, our bins would only have half a day's information in them. We're going to go with this for right now at this point in the course, but later on, we're going to show you how to solve this. In a later module, be on the lookout for start of day, end of day, and the between operators. The bin function can be extremely useful if I want to do things like grouping by date. Now we can actually group at multiple levels. If I come down here, I want to summarize my counts by both counter name, and I want those binned up by the date. And here you can see my average disks per second write for the date of May the 10th. I had 1,126,314. And then you can see my disk reads and so forth. The order in which I list these can be somewhat important. If I come down here and I have swapped my bin with the counter name. So now you can see that I have my dates coming first. There's May the 10th, May the 10th, May the 10th for these various counters, and I can see how many entries I had. I can bin by things other than the dates. Here you can see I want to group my counter values into groups of 10. So when I run this, you can see that for counter values in the range of 80 to 89, I have the number of rows at that percent level, 318,527. Then I have 60, 90%, and so forth.